All right, guys, welcome back to another video. This is the day after the CMA published their provisional findings, and yesterday was a pretty crazy day in terms of all the news that was coming out about the Xbox Activision Blizzard case. And there was different takes from the start of when it came out to then later on takes that completely went 180. And like I said, I'm no expert in this. I'm just going through some of the stuff that has been coming out from analysts and other people that are more experts in the Activision Blizzard case. And it started off, like I said, everyone thought that the provisional findings meant that the deal was going to be blocked. It sounded like it was a really bad thing. Those were all the headlines. And then later on, you dig deeper into the actual documents, and it seems like there's a chance that this thing actually is going to go forward with an approval as long as Xbox can present their remedies properly and the CMA is good with those remedies. And one of the main things from the provisional findings was that they hadn't even taken into account one of the major remedies with Call of Duty, which was that 10-year deal that they had offered to PlayStation specifically, but also to Nintendo and to Steam. And I feel like going forward, if they look into that, I think a logical takeaway would be 10-year deal to keep Call of Duty on the platform on PlayStation would be something that would be a remedy that the CMA would accept. But who knows? They may not. We'll see going forward. But we have this analysis here from Foss Patents, who specifically is from this guy here, Florian Miller, who is the founder of the Foss Patents blog, is a competition-focused intellectual property activist turned analyst with 30+ years of industry expertise. And if we remember on this blog here, he was the person who kind of corrected a lot of people who had come out and said that Sony had been given an extension on their subpoena because they had asked for it, a 4th extension. But the reality was, from what he was saying, was that Sony had just not been, they didn't cooperate. They had filed a motion now to get the subpoena quashed so they wouldn't have to give the information that Microsoft was looking for. And a lot of this information, I think, would expose a lot of the third-party deals that PlayStation was taking part in. So it'd be really interesting to see. And in terms of just getting business insights as to how the gaming industry is working and the deals that Sony partakes in, it would be very awesome to see some of those documents come out, but who knows if they ever will. Now here's his take on the provisional findings. This is UK CMA's remedies notice in Microsoft Activision Blizzard cases more receptive to non-divestiture remedies than in the Facebook Giphy and various other cases. And the non-divestiture remedies would be more like the behavioral remedies, I believe, whereas previously I think the assumption was that if they blocked this case, or if they said that it was anti-competitive, they would be asking for structural remedies, and one of those things would be to sell off Call of Duty. But within the provisional findings, they specifically said they are open to behavioral remedies, and one of those big behavioral remedies I think Microsoft is going to be able to present is that 10-year deal. It says here, the discussion of what the UK Competitions and Market Authority's provisional findings released yesterday means it is in full swing. So I'd like to do another short follow-up. Let me give you the context for this particular follow-up. In my initial reaction, I stated my feeling that the UK Competition and Markets Authority is being constructive just in its own way. I noted that the CMA now distinguishes very clearly between areas of no concern, which is Candy Crush, which you would think that would be something that you would focus on because that's a massive game on mobile devices, has a lot more reach, limited concern, impact on competition in the console market, and more significant concern, impact on cloud gaming services. Practically all of the concerns are still on the table, but in a more nuanced fashion. My initial reaction was primarily about the remedies notice, which I think didn't get enough attention by some other people. After reading the full 277-page report, I followed up my observations on that one. There was so much noise yesterday about the headlines of the announcement Microsoft Activision deal could harm gamers, emphasis added. So that was the thing. When this launched, or when this dropped yesterday, it was early in the morning, depending on where you live. It was just headline after headline, and it really kind of muddied the waters as to what should be the takeaway from these provisional findings. Now, I'm no expert. Like I've said, I'm not a lawyer. This is just my layman's view on what is going on from reading analysts' thoughts and just reading through some of the publishings of the provisional findings. So when I first saw the headlines, I thought the deal is dead in the water. And then as the day went on, read more, I think that is not the truth. I think there is a chance that this thing is going to go through, but who knows? He says, just like that headline, the full report is also replete with may, might, and could sentences. Let's face it, the legal standard is a balancing of probabilities. It's not that any deal can be prohibited based on a combination of doomsday scenarios. No matter the topic, if you look at everything that may, might, could happen and take the worst case permutation of all those may, might, could scenarios, you'll eventually arrive at a negative scenario, but that is not the law. Sometimes the CMA even combines its disclaimers and provisionally finds that something may happen or be the case. They can easily adjust those positions when they perform a final balancing, because provisional is not final and may is not will. They don't have to admit that they were wrong on anything in order to clear the deal based on one or more concessions. I continue to have faith in this process. So he's saying here, this is the process. It's provisional findings. There's absolutely nothing final about these provisional findings, and that's why this process is occurring. I believe Microsoft has 21 days now to respond to this and give their rebuttal to those provisional findings. And that 10-year deal, I think, is going to have a huge effect. And we know that they've subpoenaed Sony, which we'll see if they get that information. He says here, on Twitter, I explained that the same name of the game has two parts. It says, my perspective is that Microsoft and Activision have to continue their efforts to explain why certain concerns are based on unrealistic doomsday scenarios, and B, above all, show why the proposed access remedies will be effective, reliable, and administratable. Then it is may, might, could fly. Now he goes on here, talks a bit more about the behavioral remedies, as well as comparing it to the Facebook versus Giphy case. And as we know, that merger did get canceled because of CMA concerns. But it says here, as a Twitter user pointed out in a reply to me, the CMA's remedies notice in the Facebook Giphy case, a merger that got canceled because of the CMA's concerns, did not discuss any particular non-divestiture remedies. Paragraph 13 of that remedies notice said the following: our current view is that a behavioral remedy is very unlikely to be an effective remedy to the SLCs or any resulting adverse effects that we have provisionally identified. However, we will consider any behavioral remedies put forward as part of this consultation. The second sentence says will consider is meaningless because they simply can't refuse to look at a proposal at all. The key thing is that the Facebook Giphy remedies notice did not discuss specific non-divestiture remedies, unlike the notice in the Microsoft Activision Blizzard case, as they clearly do state in that provisional finding that there are specific remedies that they are looking for, and behavioral remedies could solve that. So I think that, like he's saying here, is a big difference when you're comparing the two. He says, both Microsoft and Sony Interactive Entertainment have provided detailed chronologies to the CMA of the negotiations between Microsoft and SIE, providing their own commentary on why certain aspects of certain offers should or should not have been accepted by the party. And he finishes it off saying that he has faith in the CMA making a rational decision in the end between now and late April. And it's not about the might, may, or could in terms of what could happen, but it's about balancing these probabilities. And he's remaining optimistic. That's the main thing. So that's why I remain optimistic. There are risks involved. The CMA is sending out a clear message to all large technology companies that any significant acquisition they will make is certain to get a rough ride. And it's not just the CMA. The FTC was doing it. The article from GameIndustry.biz yesterday talking about the comments from Michael Patcher and the Wedbush analyst. Basically, they had come to the conclusion that this is posturing between government departments that are trying to show that they are big and that they are the heroes here, and that they would be able to make a trillion-dollar company like Microsoft, a massive company, step down in a deal, or like back off on a deal, stuff like that. So could also be that as well. So yesterday's provisional findings, I don't think in any way means the deal is blocked, and it doesn't mean that the deal is going to go through. But I think from reading further into this, the behavioral remedies, if Microsoft presents a good case, there is a chance that they are accepted. Now we have a couple more things here I want to show here from Florian himself, as well as some graphs from the actual provisional findings. So this one's interesting here. It says Microsoft to the FTC judge. Sony has deployed delegations of executives, large teams of outside lawyers, and high-priced economists to persuade regulators here and around the world to block its acquisition of Activision Blizzard. They are pulling out all the stops to make sure that this thing does not go through. Sony is definitely scared of this deal going through. That's the thing, so without a shadow of a doubt, they can see the writing on the wall that they are behind when it comes to building an open ecosystem, subscription, and cloud. And if this deal goes through, they will be even more behind. And really the only fault that is it's the fault of Sony for never really evolving their business models. I mean, you look at Sony, they've always kind of followed in the footsteps in evolving the business models, which I don't blame them because their current business models are continuing to work. But I think going forward into the future, they will fall behind in the gaming industry if they continue with trying to push consoles as like the end all and be all for gamers, that you have to buy the PlayStation 6, 7, 8, 9 in order to be able to play the PlayStation games. I just don't think it's going to work in the future. And I think they know that too. And this deal here is going to put them even further behind in terms of trying to catch up to where Microsoft is. One thing that they do have are those first party games that eventually I think that they will be putting into their subscription service that will provide value for a lot of people in terms of trying to or wanting to subscribe to the service, even though first party isn't the games that are most played on the PlayStation platform. And he has another tweet here, if I can find it. Here it is. FTC discovery news. Microsoft has subpoenaed Google now. So Sony and Google. Activision Blizzard has subpoenaed Nintendo. So they're getting documents from all these massive companies. And discovery dispute between Sony and Microsoft involves inter alia Sony's unwillingness to go forward with production of PlayStation's chief Jim Ryan's documents. So we'll see what happens. They don't want to show those documents, and I think there will be a lot of juicy stuff for us to talk about and to see more insights about the gaming industry. And I'm hoping that they have to present them. Not even for like the fact that it may help this deal go through, but just from the interesting side of things in terms of the gaming industry. And finally, we have this here. So this is the CMA full report, 277 pages, but there are some really interesting graphs that give insight as to how this is going to affect the market and how gamers play. We have this first one here saying only 6% of PlayStation users sampled so that they would buy an Xbox next. And if we know how many users are within PlayStation 5 right now, that's I think 30 million or so, and that's going to continue to grow throughout this generation. That is a small market share that they could easily try to win back in other means by giving more value to subscription services, continue to release great games. There's so many things they can do. Maybe make some sort of Call of Duty competitor with all the studios that they have. I mean, they've made Resistance, they've made Killzone, they even made SOCOM. I know it's third person, but they have experience in making shooters, and they could easily find some sort of competition to Call of Duty. Nothing that would probably overtake it, but something that would grab some of that market share, which you could replace that 6% that leave. But again, this is just what the people surveyed, so we don't know. It could extrapolate out exactly like this as it gets further. Now, as more information comes out and as Game Pass gets better, maybe those numbers change, but we wouldn't know that right now. Then it says here with this graph, when asked about the availability of titles on the platform, Call of Duty ranked higher than PlayStation exclusive games. So 73% over 69%. And the source here is the availability of which particular games influenced you towards buying a PlayStation. Call of Duty. And we know PlayStation has had the Call of Duty rights for many years now, and they have exclusive content. It's extremely powerful. I believe they were Activision's biggest customer in 2021 or 2020, and they're probably been their biggest customer for many years, ever since Call of Duty has had those marketing rights and ever since the PS4 was sold way more than the Xbox One. That's how big Call of Duty is to PlayStation, and if they lose that, they're going to have to do a lot of work to get that back. But here's the thing, Microsoft has already said they're going to be keeping PlayStation or Call of Duty on PlayStation for the next 10 years. They're just not going to have the marketing rights. So they're going to have to come up with a way to convince people to play Call of Duty on PlayStation rather than going to Game Pass or Xbox. And that's not the fault of Xbox. That's business, right? That's all part of business. They're not taking the game off of the console. So they still have that opportunity. And then finally, we have here, if Call of Duty wasn't on PlayStation, they would have bought an Xbox or PC to play Call of Duty. 89% said that they would still buy games mainly on PlayStation. Specifically, this has likely impact on non-Call of Duty gaming. Most recent Call of Duty game not available on PlayStation. Those who said that in this scenario that they would have bought an Xbox or PC as well as a PlayStation were then asked about other game purchases. Of these respondents, 89% said that if the most recent Call of Duty game were not available on PlayStation, they would have still bought other games mainly for PlayStation. So there you go. It's one game. It's one game. Majority of PlayStation gamers would still buy other games on PlayStation. They're not going to be losing the majority of their current market share, their current user base completely to another platform. And I mean, these graphs are very telling, which makes it even more interesting of the conclusions that the CMA came to, especially focusing on consoles and how they think that the deal could increase the prices of consoles, which just doesn't make any sense. Especially you look at what has happened in different regions of the world in the PS5. PlayStation, in the regions that they dominate, they actually went out and increased the price of the consoles because they know they can do it, which is the exact same thing that the CMA is arguing against. The company that is fighting this deal are doing those anti-competitive things. So maybe all of this stuff, hopefully all this stuff is talked about and brought up and evaluated further on once Microsoft comes back with their response to these provisional findings. But that's it for me, guys. Let me know your thoughts on this. Let me know what you think about this deal so far. Lots of interesting stuff coming out, and we'll keep track of any big news that comes out regarding the Activision Blizzard deal. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for your support, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.
Bye.